I am sure that I told you the story, that I was living with a neighbor in Ramat HaSharon. She voted for the right, but when I discussed with her, it was 3 years ago, when I discussed with her about peace, she said, like all the Israelis, we want peace. And I asked her, what you want that Israel will give for peace? She say like this: all the West Bank is okay. I even bought once a little bit of land there, but I accept because anyway, I cannot make tourism there. Golan I don't want to give back because every year I am going to make ski. And suddenly I asked her, and what about East Jerusalem? She was thinking, and she said, why not? In any case, I cannot visit there. I'm afraid to walk there. Then it's not mine. I was surprised because the intellectuals, the journals, TV, 3 years ago, everybody repeated the mantra, never Jerusalem will divide. And suddenly, a woman, in the Middle Ages, that vote more or less for the right, said that Jerusalem is not so important for him. The Golan, because of the ski. She was, you see, not poor. She approved her conditions. But Jerusalem, she said, why not? Anyway, if you cannot use something, it's not yours. I think it's because this deep pragmatism, I don't dominate in the reality, it's not mine in the reality. Now, you can ask me one question. If Har HaBayit, Al-Aqsa and Omar is the problem, by this logic, that the Israeli will understand, in any case, they don't dominate in the reality this little territory, holy territory. If you don't dominate, you cannot build a synagogue. Why you are going to send tomorrow your children to fight for it? If it's not yours, it will not be, because nobody can imagine that the Islamic religion will disappear in the next 10 years. Maybe a lot of states will change their leaders, but I don't believe that Islam will disappear. We have to understand, the person, the leader that stopped the peace process was not Arafat, and it wasn't in the Intifada, in the new Intifada. It was our Prime Minister that stopped the peace process and proposed to the Palestinians a final solution, that they will come and sign, that the peace that they are signed is the last thing that they demand from the Israeli state. Now, it was very clear that if you ask the other side, come, we are going to make a final solution, our leader, our Prime Minister, had to know what is the red line for the Palestinians. A rational leader had, I think, to negotiate, not openly, to understand what is the red lines for the other side. Barak went to Camp David with Arafat without knowing what is the red line for the Palestinians. Now, he proposed a lot of things to the Palestinians, much more than leaders before. But what astonished me now, after we know a few things, is how could an Israeli leader imagine that a Palestinian leader cannot negotiate in renounce maybe of sovereignty in Al-Aqsa. You know, the territory of Al-Aqsa. Now, if you are looking in all, from 88, Arafat, in his political rhetoric, in all his speeches, he start or finish them with calling, we are going to Al-Quds. From 88 till 2000, Arafat spoke all the time, we are going in winning in Al-Quds. What I mean by it? Before 88, from 64, the line of the OLP, PLO, was we want all Palestine. It was the official position. I mean, Jaffa and Haifa, the two towns on the Mediterranean that was once Arab towns, was always in the 70s, if people remember, was the target of the national movement. From 88, officially, the liberation movement of the Palestinian, the leader of the liberation movement of the Palestinian, replaced Al-Quds, Jerusalem, instead of Haifa and Jaffa. I think that every Israeli that loves his country, that is for the existence of the state of Israel, had to be happy that Arafat, 12 years, last 12 years, is speaking about Al-Quds, and he made from Al-Quds the national symbol of the liberation. Not Haifa and Jaffa, but Al-Quds, Jerusalem. We know it, that the Palestinian leader couldn't accept the Israeli offer. Why he couldn't accept it? Because it was a final offer, an end of all the conflict. It wasn't a step. And suddenly, Israel asked him to renounce it. It was clear, he refused. But what happened, in the Israeli opinion, is catastrophic. Because an average person in the Israeli street saw in Camp David that his leader proposed the Palestinians much more than everybody before him. After our Prime Minister is proposing so much and the Palestinians refused, we are with our Prime Minister. They waited to a peaceful solution, a bad solution, but they were waited to arrive to Al-Quds. And suddenly, the Israeli state say to them, you can accept 20% of the old Palestine, but without Al-Quds, without Al-Aqsa, without the Dome of the Rock. This is the structural explanation why suddenly it was blowing up in the Palestinian streets. Now, there is, as always in history, there is also, the match that started everything. I mean, the starter. 200 years ago, Napoleon said, with bayonet you can make everything. Bayonet, you know what is bayonet? On the rifle you are putting a bayonet. 200 years ago, Napoleon said, with bayonet you can make everything, only one thing you cannot make with it. You know what? To sit on it. You understand? אתה לא יכול לשבת על כידונים. Till Israeli power, army, will not go out from all the occupied territories, everything that happened in the occupied territories is the responsibility of the Israeli power. the Israeli government. Now we are in a very extreme situation, but it's not the most extreme situation that we can arrive in the conflict with the Palestinians. With the uprising of the Palestinian people in the October month, we arrived to a new stage in the confrontation. Israel cannot find any means to stop this uprising, and I don't see which kind of options Israeli has to stop it. Now, to throw away all the Palestinians, I mean a deportation, I don't think that it is a reliable option, because if Israel will push Palestinians outside Palestine, it can destabilize all the regimes in the area, because pushing them to Jordan will bring, I think, the end of the Jordan kingdom. And after it, who knows what will happen with all the states in the Middle East. Now, the options of deportation, I don't think it's a really option. And I don't believe that the United States and the United Nations will let Israel to do it. You know, the option, the terrible option of liquidation cannot be, I don't believe, in liquidation, massive liquidation of people. In Israel cannot do it, he is not in a position to do something like this. Then the little options, if you want, much more little options, is to bombard tomorrow the big cities, but bombarding the big cities cannot bring any solution of the problem. The real option is to start to take out all the colonies and to bring back Israelis to their homeland. I mean, Israeli before the 67. It's not so simple, because the colons, the settlers will resist. But I think that Israel has to decide or to continue an eternal war with the Palestinians. In the 20th century, the first part of the 20th century is the century of territorial domination, territorial imperialism. In the second half of the 20th century, we are coming more and more to indirect domination, you know, of economic, in the economic level, in the cultural level. And Israel is one of the last bastions of territorial domination, of otherness. Now in Israel, I think that there is a development, something is moving from territorial domination, or if you want, territorial right wing, territorial right wing, to a right wing of identity. You know, other word of it is racism. You know, territorialism or racism. And I think that the real force in the right wing, national wing in Israeli society, culture, political culture, is more and more, from a day to a day, a more and more a right of identity in not a right of territory. You understand me? Now in Israel, the right wing will become much more like in Europe, like in Japan. You see? Now, it is not so clear, but people are starting to think about it, that there is a contradiction by the definition Jewish and democratic. It cannot fit itself, because the Jewishness, the definition of the Jewishness is that Arab cannot come in
By becoming an Israeli citizen, he is not becoming a Jew, but he is becoming an Israeli. I mean, Jewishness is something exclusive that threw away the otherness. Israeliness is something inclusive. Israeliness accepts the other. By definition, because Palestinian Israelis is Israeli citizens, then the definition of the state has to fit the definition of the citizenship in Israel. The citizens, somebody that become French, become automatically French. Somebody that become a citizen become automatically French. The meaning of it is that try to create an upper culture that belongs to all the communities, and without destroying the other identity in the other cultures. I think that the Palestinian culture has to continue to exist in Israel. I think the Jewish culture has to continue to exist, but there has to be an upper culture, an upper identity that will combine all the parts of the Israeli society, not to blow it up. For example, the national hymn, I think that it has to change, or to have another part that will include the Palestinian Israelis in the hymn. I think, for example, that in the Independence Day, for example, we have to mention also what happened in '48 to the Palestinians, the tragedy, the NAKBA. It has to be a part of our memory, in some level, the memory of the two parts of the society. I think that the Chok HaShvut, the law of the return, has to be abolished and replaced by another law. Most of the Israeli society don't understand what is their identity, and it's very dangerous, because I think that racism that was sprung up in French, in Germany, in Poland, mostly was especially because of uninsurance of identity, not of insurance of identity. You understand me? I mean, always, only when you are safe with your identity, you are sure, a little bit more sure with your identity, you are less aggressive. But when you are not sure about your aggressivity, you attack the others to confirm your identity in some way.
Okay, I will say a few things about the elections. 3 months ago, 2 months ago, the elections in Israel that brought Arik Sharon to power. First of all, the election is a direct result, a direct phenomenon that came out from the Intifada of the Al-Aqsa, because Barak lost the election because he couldn't progress in the peace process. Paradoxically, the reason that Barak lost the election is because he couldn't bring a solution from this conflict. Now, if he didn't bring a solution, why people voted to the right? People who vote for the right, most of the people voted for the right because it wasn't any alternative on the left. We saw that Shimon Peres, that his image is the image of a peacemaker, he could, I think, he could win the election if he was against Sharon. Anyway, it established a consensus against Barak. Barak, I think, destroys so much in the peace process. Barak destroys so much also in political representation in Israel that a lot of people this time didn't go to vote. the fact that so many people of the left, especially the Arab vote, didn't prefer not to participate in the election, brought Sharon to power. Now, but the atmosphere, the climate today in Israel is a very depressive one. A big part of the left was astonished by the Intifada, was astonished by the violence of the Intifada, especially because they believe that Barak did everything to make the peace, because, you know, one of the phenomena of the Barak was that he is doing everything for the peace. He is giving to the Palestinians much more than anybody before him, but in the end it was clear that Barak played with the history, played with the Palestinian, I think. You see, in the representation, for example, it was said that he is giving to the Palestinian 95% of the territories. Nobody in that time in the left asked themselves which kind of 95 of the which kind of 25% of the territories, because it was divided to three. I mean, the West Bank was divided to three. In the Zionist myth of 100 years, there is an expression in Hebrew they say, I mean, it was a leitmotif of the Zionism till now. The sentence, od dunam, od ez. You know what is a dunam? It's a kind of, you know, land. Od dunam, od ez. You know what is a ez is a goat, goat? A goat? Goat. The leitmotif of Zionism in the colonization was more land, more goat. I think that today it's become more and more clear in dynamic of the relationship between Israelis inland, Israelis with Palestinians, that more dunam, od dunam, pachot ez, less goat. You understand? I mean, more land, less money, less a lot of things. Now, I am not optimist, but as I say once, I am not fatalist. I mean, Sharon is not the worst thing that could happen here, and I don't think that it's much worse than basically than Barak at the end. For the moment, you know, he wanted the power all his life. He got the power. The question is if he's enough intelligent to understand that besides power, if he want to come into history, he has to make peace. If it will continue like till now, Sharon will have to decide or to give, you know, to try to make it in the blitz, to occupy again all the territories, or he have to push himself to a kind of process of peace, a new process. There is not other alternative. I don't believe that he will continue long time with this situation of the terror, the Palestinian terror. We are here before, I can say, a very sharp stage of the development of the conflict between Israel and Palestinians. This ceasefire today is only a break, a very short break, that for itself it cannot bring nothing. Stopping violence is always the request of the dominator, of somebody that has the force. It's always in history, somebody that has the force is against violence. You know, force is another kind of violence that we are not thinking about it, but it's a kind of violence. The presence of a force is a kind of violence. Anyway, we see in all the conflicts that who is the stronger, who dominate the other one, request stopping the violence. I'm seeing the violence of Palestinians, even if it's ugly, as a violence of people that fight for liberate themselves from the domination of Israel. You know, for example, as a historian, I can give you an example that in Algeria, in the end of the 50s, the French called their fight in Algeria, they call it pacification. You know, the war was called the pacification in Algeria. They tried to pacify, if you want, Algeria. It was the title of the war was to pacification, act of pacification. Brutal act of violence, if you want, was called the pacification in Algeria against the violence of the people that were fighting for their independence. By the way, in Algeria, they fight it in an ugly way. I think also the Palestinians are fighting in very ugly ways. We saw it here in the bombings in the Dolphinarium, and etc. But the ugliness of the weak is not, it cannot be compared to the ugliness of the strong. The ugliness, you know, Bertolt Brecht, the poet, the German poet, says that even the cry of somebody that suffer make ugly the face. But the Palestinians are fighting for their independence, and they want to throw out Israel from the occupied territories, because in all the proposition of Barak and Camp David wasn't a clear position that Israel has to go back to the frontier of the 67. The only beginning of the solution will be that Israel will get out of all the occupied territories from 67, and if there will be Israeli Jewish sitting in the occupied territories, it can be only with the agreement of the Palestinians. The principle has to be. What is so tragic and interesting at the same time now in the political climate in Israel is that a big part of the Israeli pacifists were fed up with the Palestinians, don't believe the Palestinians, and think today that Palestinians are to be blamed of the continuing of the conflict today. Why? Because all their thought was built of the fact that the problem of the conflict is the war of 67. If you more or less try to find a solution to the occupation, you will finish the conflict with the Palestinian people that is continuing for 100 years. I think that this mentality, this concept that the conflict is because 67 brought a lot of Israelis to the position to be anti-Palestinian today. The concept is also, if I can, I will try to explain it, is what is mine, what is yours is mine, but I am a nice guy and I accept to give you a part of what is mine that you are holding it today. What is mine is the territory till the frontier of 67, the border of 67. What is mine, but I am nice to give you, is the territories, the 22% of the old Palestine. This is also mine, historically, because of the Bible, but I'm a nice guy, Jewish heart, and I will give you most of it. Basically, if you want, the Zionists left in Israel were believing in this kind of relationship between Israel and Palestine. They cannot think that the conflict, the roots of the conflict is our colonization in the Middle East. They cannot understand it. The root of the conflict is the colonization, Zionist colonization in the Middle East. To admit it is to start to change our relationship with the Palestinian people. To admit what? That 67 is only a stage in the development of the conflict. Because they will not find a justification to be here and to accept and asking to recognize the Israeli state. This is the reason that I don't think that from a day to tomorrow a lot of people will recognize that the conflict is not only the conflict of 67. It's not only a conflict of occupied territories. It's a conflict of something that happened in history of the 20th century and can be resolved only by recognizing this. But Israeli that have a population of Jewish population of 5 millions. In the border they have how many Arabs? More than 100 millions of Arabs. It's very, very bizarre to see the fact that Israeli insist not to go out from the occupied territory. But we have to understand one thing, it couldn't be continued. The only thing that I can say is the price can be very high of bloodshed, but you cannot say that Zionism in the colonization, the Zionist colonization, there is a perspective. Basically, the Jewish nationalism developed much more like the German or the Japanese nationalism and not the French or the British or the American nationalism that didn't want other people from other origin come into the nation. In Durban, South Africa, Israel was accused to be a state of apartheid, and Zionism is defined as racism. My opinion about it, everybody is astonished in Israel. Why we are not apartheid? Why Zionism is racism? The two words, apartheid and racism, are very, very, bad words. In the beginning of the 21st century, it's not nice to be living in apartheid state. It's not nice to define your movement, national movement, as racism. But apartheid in Holland, in South Africa, is living separate. In this way, yes, Israeli is a kind of a state of apartheid because, first of all, an Israeli Jew in Israel cannot marry an Arab citizen in Israel. They have to go outside to be married, in Europe or in Chypre and come back. The reason that in Israeli democracy you cannot marry in a civil marriage is exactly to separate between Jewish and Arab. Why people that are not religious adopt a religious marriage? The only reason was not to be mixed with the natives, the Arab natives. It's from the beginning of the Israeli state. A non-religious government decided that the only way to marry in Israel is after the religious marriage. I think it's a kind of apartheid. another way of apartheid. You know, 80% of the land in Israel belongs to the Keren Kayemet, Israel. It's not a state institution, but in, I think it's 49, the state passed most of the land that Israel got in the war of 48 to this organization. Keren Kayemet Israel cannot sell or give land to Arab citizens. How we can call it? Apartheid? Racism? The fact that 80% of the land, a part of the citizens that are living here cannot buy or get it or rent it? This is a kind of racism. Okay, not to call it apartheid, not to use bad words, mean words. Okay, find other words. But basically, there is a separation in Israel. Basically, Zionism is a kind of nationalism that don't try to liberate, to build a nation state that everybody will be equal with it. Because if this state belong to somebody that live and die in the United States, and not to Arab citizens that is a member of this state, you can say that something of racism inside, built in, as we say in English, built in Zionism. And why? Because Zionism took the model of German folkism. You know, it's a kind of nationalism that you can find in the Central Europe, that the nation is after the origin. Then, I repeat, Durban, when they speak about racism, it's not racism like the Nazis, it's not racism like South Africa, but it's also a kind of racism, and nothing will help Israel. She's going to stay one of the first states in the 21st century that applied a racist policy inside the state and outside the state in occupied territories. But I'm afraid for a bloody process of bloodshed, because of egoism, national egoism, and most of all, because of stupidity. I'm not so clever, but I don't want to take part of stupid people. When in 1906, Israel killed Abu Ayyash. You remember Abu Ayyash, the engineer of the Hamas. On the grave, in the funeral, on the grave, a lot of young Palestinians, Muslims, told the journalist that they take the revenge and they will kill a lot of Israel. Exactly 50 days after it, bombs was exploded in Dizengoff, in Jerusalem, in Ashkelon. Something that brought to power Bibi Netanyahu. I think the responsibility of this process was first of all on the head of Shimon Peres at the time. He lost his power because the execution of Abu Ayyash. Now, what happened last week in Israel, with the killing of General Minister Rehavam Ze'ev. In the same way, it's a kind of response of the killing of Abu Ali, Mustafa Abu Ali, the leader of the Popular Front. In the funeral, they say that they will take revenge. And the first time they will try to kill political persons in Israel. Because they say Mustafa Abu Ali was a political leader, not military. And you see, in some way, Israel invited this assassination. Mm-hmm. A very cruel guy, but a very honest guy. He decided to say in a haute voix, openly, what a lot of people are thinking secretly. He arrived to the conclusion, after he was, liberate himself from the army, he came to the conclusion to come into the politics with a flag that reclaimed deportation of the Arabs from Palestine. Not from the Israeli, but from the occupied territory. To clean the occupied territories from a Palestinian population. He thought that it is the only real solution of the conflict between Israeli and Palestinians. I believe that a lot of people are thinking the same thing, but they have not the courage, and politically they are clever enough not to admit it before all the world. But he was a guy, as I say, too honest to play, and also he knows that he can build himself as a political person on this tendency. And he built himself on this tendency. The flag, politically, that make him a kind of leader of the extreme right in Israel, was the declaration of transfer. Transfer, in Hebrew, he took the letter T as transfer as a symbol of his party. T, tet. Transfer. It was his letter in the election. It's the letters. Today, the second part of from the second part of the 20th century, we started to call transfer, deportation, we started to call also ethnic purification. Can you imagine the Israeli state 40 years after the Shoah? A leader started a political campaign with the idea of cleansing, ethnic cleansing. It's very difficult to believe, but symbolically it shows what is history. The problem with Gandhi that he was a little bit late, because in the first part of the 20th century, to purify and to make transfers of deportation was possible, especially in the third world. But it's become less and less popular in the second half of the 20th century. In the end of the 20th century, we saw a leader, a Serb leader that decided to make cleansing, ethnic cleansing. He is putting on trial, international trial. If Reham Ze'avi could realize his program, he could become clearly, internationally, it was clear that he could become, a wanted person. A wanted person. Now, he wasn't legitimate till the day of his death. The political elites took, distance from him. That 8 months before he was dead, he became a minister in the Israeli government, with the Labour Party in the same government. A person that declared that his program, his project is to clean the occupied territory from Palestinians, become a minister and push the assassination, push Israel forward, trying to avoid this process and give chance to Israel to avoid peace negotiation. Remember, this assassination gave more reasons to Sharon to avoid, to push away to run away from peace negotiations, and nobody can be really politically happy about what happened. From the point of view of the end of January 2002, we think today in Israel that Sharon decided to do in the occupied territories of Palestine the same thing that he did in the beginning of the 80s in Lebanon, that he started to do in Lebanon in the 80s. I mean, he destroyed the Palestinian Authority in the thought of Lebanon. And this is one of the reasons of the war of 82. But in Lebanon, Sharon succeeded to destroy the Palestinian Authority, but he put the basic of the development of the Hezbollah. The first responsible the fact of the construction of a resistant movement, a strong resistant movement, with another character of the laïc, Palestinian movement, was the Hezbollah. And who first built the Hezbollah was Arik Sharon. Mm-hmm. I don't know if people are learned from history or not. In one thing I am sure that Arik Sharon didn't learn nothing from history. His position, it's become more and more clear, is to destroy the Arafat authority in the occupied territory. Maybe he believed that he can send away Arafat to continue to keep the Palestinian people with a very low level of resistance. You know, in the history of the Palestinian people, they were never kamikaze. It was, I think, till 93, we cannot find Palestinians that become kamikaze. Mm-hmm. Lebanese, yes, but not Palestinian. It's a new phenomenon. The Israeli occupation succeeded to transform a people, a very soft people, to a very cruel people. This week we met the first time a Palestinian girl that decided to sacrifice her life in fighting the Israeli occupation. I don't think that Sharon will succeed in elimination of the resistance. I think that he will be the father of a very strong Islamic movement in the Palestinian people. I don't think that we will arrive to peace with this territorial compromise of 67. I think that the compromise has to be of 48, with the historical result of 48. You understand? I mean, Israel has to go back to the 67 borders and try to convince herself that we have to do something with the result of 48. Now, from the daily life, I can assure you that there are more and more Israelis today that accept to go back to the 67 borders. It was Friday that 50 Israeli soldiers, officers, and even high officers, the first time in their history, decided to act collectively. Till now, there were officers that refused to go to the occupied territories, but on the personal, individual level. You understand me, yeah? It's the first time they collectively, 50 officers, signs a paper that they decide that they are not going to occupy territories because they don't want to be a criminal of war. This is very important. Not because they are afraid, but they don't think that the occupation justified this process. It was a shock for a lot of people in Israel. It's a new thing. Even the chief of the army react. In some way we see a panic also about it. We have to understand, in the Israeli mind, the occupied territories is not occupied territories. It's a part of their patrie, their land, you understand? Yehuda v'Shomron, it's not occupied territories for Israeli mind. To refuse to go to Yehuda v'Shomron, it's a new stage of mind. It's not Lebanon, it's not Egypt. It's the Holy Land. To refuse to go to serve in the Holy Land, it's something new. Every day of activity, a military activity in the occupied territory cost to Israel $1 million shekels. I mean $250,000 million every day. The economic situation in Israel is very difficult. More and more unemployment. And even the people who are working, their salary become less and less. Now the Palestinians become very, very strong and cruel in their fight. 30 years ago, nobody could imagine that these soft people, these people that accept the Zionist colonization for 100 years, in the end, will create for themselves this kind of resistance, very cruel resistance, very tragic resistance. It's a good lesson to understand that everybody can become everybody in some human condition, historical condition. I understand that against force, in all the history, force creates violence. The problem that violence didn't finish when you want. You understand?
When you?
Violence doesn't stop as you want. If tomorrow it will be peace, if tomorrow it will be a Palestinian state, this kind of violence is not good for the future. You understand? You know, the last 3 weeks, it's 3 weeks I think, no? We pass here in Israel, Jewish and Palestinians, Israelis and Arabs, we passed a very important events, a very important process of fight, first of all, of a lot of people that were killed. It's the first time in Israel that between us and the Palestinians, so many Israelis are killed, soldiers and civilians. The impact of this tragic process of killing so many from both sides create a situation that I can define it as everything is possible. I mean, the possibility is very, very large. Everything is possible. Tout est possible in French. I mean that from one side, the aggravation of the situation, I mean, the bombs, the suicide, the kamikaze attitude of the Palestinian resistance, create in Israel a kind of panic. There are few Israelis that believe that we can continue to live in this situation. It reminds me the beginning of the first Intifada in the end of 87, the shock. But the continuing of the violence, of the resistance, of the tragedy, pushed a lot of Israelis the last week to a kind, I say, a new position. Okay, maybe the Palestinians are not so clever. Maybe the Palestinians had to accept the proposition of Barak, but in fact they didn't accept it. This is the reality. We have to handle it. We cannot continue the occupation. I never saw in my life, even not after Oslo in 93, so many Israelis sure about the fact that Israel has nothing to do in the occupied territories. I don't remember a situation like this from the war of 67. Now, it's not like before. It's not with this belief that maybe we can arrive at a compromise. We will give the Palestinians a part of the occupied territories. The settlement will stay in the occupied territories. Something turned last week. A kind of deep pessimism that say that even if we cannot arrive to a peace process, we have to go out from the occupied territories. The occupied territories kill. Now, it's the first time that I feel so deeply. I felt it in the first Intifada in 87, but this time it's clear, it's very clear between a lot of the Israelis, the consciousness of the limit of power. That every power has its limits. The price is a lot of killed people, a lot of tragedy of a lot of families. But the deep consciousness that every power has its limit started to be in the center, in the middle of the Israeli opinion. And this is something new. We have the elections in 1 year and a half. But it's a long way till these elections. I think that we are in a situation, a very, very sharp situation, that can bring tomorrow to a kind of irrational war of a reoccupation of all the cities in the Cisjordan. It can happen tomorrow. We are speaking. If it will be now in this moment, a very strong attack of Palestinians, it can bring from a day to tomorrow occupation of all the cities in occupied territories. Then this can be a beginning of a very, very black time for Israel, for the Palestinians, and even for the Arab world. The dangerous situation from one side, as I told you, it can be tomorrow. Even in the time that we are speaking, a beginning of something catastrophic for the Middle East, but in the same time, it can be a very, very deep change, much more important than Oslo. Because with Oslo, it was a kind of agreement not between equal. Tomorrow, it not will be agreement between equal, but between two sides much more equal than in 93. Why? Because of the price that the Palestinians are paying today. You understand? Much more equal. The Israelis are horrified with this terror, but also deeply they understand that people that 10 years ago nobody of them was a kamikaze are going one after another to kill themselves, to burn themselves against the occupation. This is something new.
Just I want to add some question. In this 1 month, how many Israeli killed? How do you think? 50 or 60? 70?
Yeah, something like this. I don't know exactly the number, but for a week, you have to understand, for a week, the numbers of Israelis killed by Palestinians was higher than Israelis that were killed in the streets and the highways.
In this 1 week?
In a week, there were more Israelis that were killed by the Palestinians. A few years ago, I thought that the change will be when there will be more Israelis killed in the fight than in the roads, in the traffic. And I think that, unfortunately, this situation was created last weeks, the 2 last weeks. There were more Israelis killed in the war, this kind of war, than in the roads. You understand? In the traffic. And maybe it's a beginning of change. Israel decided a few months ago to start to build the wall because of the last intifada, what you call the last wave of terrorism, to start to build a wall in principle, between Palestinians and Israelis. At the beginning, I hesitated a little bit, because I say that if they are going to build, the Israeli government is going to build a wall on the border of 67, I thought it is not a bad idea. Why? Because I say that the Israeli government declared that the wall is not the border. It's only to prevent Palestinians to cross the roads and to arrive to Netanya, Tel Aviv, Haifa. I remember that at the beginning I said, if Israel is going to build a wall on the 67 border, it may be the beginning of the realization of this peace that I believe that has to be in the border of 67. But very quickly we discovered that the wall is not on the 67 border. The government decided to build a wall that in principle will put the Palestinians, most of them, 2.5 million of Palestinians, in a kind of how we call it, I am afraid to use the word ghetto, but in some way, if we are looking of the plans that were published in the Israeli newspaper, we see kind of a very, very little area of the most of Palestinians living there, of 2.5 million of Palestinians. We can see more or less in this map, if you want. It's not exactly the map that I'm looking for, but in this map, if you want, you see this is the Cisjordania, and the plan, after a few declarations of ministers in the Israeli government, it will be something, you see, that will be separated of 3 parts, more or less like this, and we will be around by Israeli power. To keep most of the colonization in the Israeli domination, and to try to took out most of the Palestinians out of the direct military domination of the Israeli power. If I'm looking at this map and the plans to build this wall, today I'm against the wall. I think it is a step more against the peace, because if it was a wall on the 67 border, even if it's not the best thing to live between people, in this condition I could accept it. But today the world is a kind of annexation, fixed annexation of territories. The state of Israel, that is a strong state and a rich state, are going to fight for a few more generations for a little bit more pieces of land that they want to take from the Palestinians. Looking on the plans of the world today show us that a lot of villages will become separate completely from the Palestinian state. Something new happened in the last year in Israel, because I think it's the first time that in Israeli opinion there is a kind of majority, and this is new in the history from that war of the 67. It's the first time that we see that most of the Israelis accept the peace more or less in the 67 border. It's new. The myth of the Eretz Israel, I mean the land of Israel that till the Jordani, was finished in the Israeli mythology. I don't know a lot of Israelis that are thinking in the terms of big Israel. This finished, this dream of a big land till the Jordan River, finished in the most mind of the Israelis. Then the question is, why there is not a peace? Why we are not more near to the peace today than yesterday? If most of the Israelis started to understand that peace will become only when we go out from the occupied territories, the question is if we are more closer to the peace or not. In the last time I was thinking about it, because we are seeing in the polls that more and more Israelis accept, because of the last Intifada, accept the fact that one Palestine cannot exist. One state dominate the other cannot exist. And even the right accept the principle of two states. The question is, because of it, we are closer to peace or not, and this is not so simple. Unfortunately, it's not so simple. I can see in the Israeli society 3 or 4 groups that I believe doesn't want really a peace. I believe that most of the Israelis today want a peace without the land. But there is 4 groups, if I can say, that put all their opposition to the peace process. I don't know if to start from below or from up. First of all, in the political elites that dominate Israel for the last 35 years, we see most of them are politicians that came out from the army. Even in the left, the Zionist left, and in the right, we see that most of the leaders came out from the army. It doesn't mean that everybody that came out from military circles has to be bad or to be wrong politically. I didn't say it. We saw last year Mitzna, the leaders of the Labour Party, really tried to make peace, to accept. The leader of the Labour Party, Amram Mitzna, that was also a general, was thinking more or less what I said before about the compromise on the 67 border. Then I say that it doesn't mean that every military is wrong politically, but there is, how we say, there is a very large group in the power that came out from the army. In this group, if it will be peace, in 2-3 years, will disappear from the political life of Israel. You see in Japan, you see in France, you see in Britain, there is no generals in the power, in government, because generals has a kind of mentality that is opposite to liberal democratic process of political decisions. I believe that a part of the political elites in Israel cannot accept a real peace because of their life as political in the future. You understand? In a peace process, they will disappear as the people that decide something. And it's very logic that they will not accept a real peace because they will lose their power in the Israeli society. You understand me? Their instinct of surviving politically, it's opposite, it's opposite to the peace process. I think politically, a peace for them, a kind of peace with equality, will be a destruction of their power in the political life in Israel. This is one group. Second group, it's evidence that the colon that are living in the Cisjordania don't want peace because they can lose, most of them, their life, you see, their vision, their dreams. Not all of them. A part of them, I believe, want to live in peace and will accept to come back to Israel. But there is a very, very tough part of them that the dreams of, biblical dreams of the future of Israel are very strong, and they are against the retirement and the peace of the 67th border. They are 200,000 people. I don't know exactly the proportions, but a part of them will fight not to go back home. Okay? This is the second group that are against. The third part that are against, I think, is the voters, some very large proportion of the voters of Likud in a party like Shas. With the journals, the newspaper make a poll of who accept the map road in the political parties in Israel. Half of the people of the Likud accept the roadmap, without knowing exactly what it means, but they accept the roadmap. When they ask the people, voters of Shas, only 7% accept the roadmap. It was a party that wasn't extreme right party a few years ago, but they don't want peace. A part of the Israeli society that came from the Jewish Arab immigrant, the Oriental immigrant, I believe that they don't want really a peace because they are afraid of equality. In a real peace between Israelis and Palestinians, a part of the Palestino-Israelis, the Arabs in Israel, the Palestinians in Israel, in a peace process, they will become a part more and more integrated to the Israeli society. These Palestinian Israelis didn't accept from this state from the last 55 years a lot. If it will be a peace that brings equality, you have to understand, they will be the most dynamic part of the Israeli society. They will run mostly to the center of culture, of politics. They will become a part of the Israeli society. You understand why a lot of people, Oriental immigrants, that were left in the Israelization process of the state, they were left in a back, now in a peace process with equality. If peace will bring equality, they will lose from the peace because the Arabs will become equally to them. They don't accept it. They are afraid from the Arabs. Not that the Arabs will kill them, but that the Arabs will become more stronger than them in the Israeli state. You understand what painful it can be, this problem of identity? They were living here and feeling here that they enjoyed the Zionist privilege as Jew. In a peace process, they can lose this privilege. They have not a real interest to make peace. I think from their point of view, identical point of view, they are right. They are paying today very, very hard because the economic rise. But if you are thinking not only from economic point of view, also from identical point of view, we can understand that they are not wrong when they are against the peace. You understand me? They are going to lose a very, very important part of their identity as Zionists in this state. They are maybe the last Zionists to continue to feel a Jew with all the privilege that the Jew have in the Middle East. You understand me? Why they don't feel so happy with the fact that the Palestinian has symbol, in NAKBA, or yesterday, Abu Mazen is standing with Sharon besides, like equal. In the symbolic level, they become equal to something. And there are a lot of people that cannot accept it because they lose power when the Arabs become equal to them. This is the third group that I think are not happy with the peace process. The fourth group is a lot of immigrants from Russia, Jewish immigrants from Russia. They also will lose with the peace because if Arabs will become equal as a state and as the Arabs in Israel, they will lose their Zionist privilege. They are afraid from it. They are earning today from this privilege. In equal society, Israeli equal society, they can lose a lot. These four groups that are not the majority of Israel are, I think, have interest to be against the peace process for the moment. Even if they are not the majority, they are the strongest part of the Israeli society. Why? Because the other part that started because they are tired to accept the peace cannot translate their, I did say, they cannot translate their feelings today to a political program. You are going to today outside here in Tel Aviv, you will ask people, you will feel the people after 2 years of terror will accept the kind of peace that they didn't accept it before. When Barak was in Camp David, the Israeli consciousness wasn't so compromised like today. The Israeli, I can say, become less colonialist and more racist maybe, but less colonialist. It's finished. Territory is not, Israel cannot be a big state. It's finished. But this part of the society that accept a territorial compromise, this is important, is not ready to translate these feelings, mental feelings, to a political program. But as a historian, I can say that one of the reasons that we don't have peace is because most of the Israeli intellectuals from the left, liberals, most of them continue to think that the compromise between Israelis and Palestine will be on the result of the war of '67. They don't understand and they don't educate the readers, the pupils, that the compromise, the real compromise between Israelis and Palestinians can be on the result of the war of '48. Even if I know and I believe that we will arrive to peace when most of the Israelis will understand that in 48 we create a tragedy. By creating the Israeli state, we create a tragedy to the Palestinian population here. We couldn't build a state without this tragedy. It will be clear. It has to be written in the history books that this state of refuge for the Jew create a tragedy for another people. I accept the fact that Israel, by its creation, create a tragedy. Israel is responsible, have to take its responsibility to the solution of this problem. We have to destroy two things to continue peace. To destroy the illusions of most of the Palestinians outside Palestine, that they will come back to here. We have to understand there is 75% only of Jewish in the Israeli state. 25% are not Jew. Israel cannot belong to only 75% of its population. Israel has to declare that it belongs to everybody that has a citizenship in Israel, without distinction. You know, in 48, when the founders of this state discussed what name to give to Israel, it were three names as propositions: Israeli state, Judah state, and Zionist state. State of Zion. You can imagine that if they choose the word Judah state instead of Israeli state, it was Judah state. What was written in the passport of Azmi Bishara? Azmi Bishara is an Arab Israelis in the Knesset. If our name of our state was Judah state, what it was written citizenship of Azmi Bishara? Jew. Judah. If it was the name of Israel was Zion, it was written Zionist. I think this is the Israeli, the way that Israeli choose the word Israelis. Anyway, I think that the Israeli state has to belong to all the Israelis. If not, it will not exist in the Middle East for a long time. I'm afraid because my student, Palestinian Israeli student, are fed up to live in a Jewish state when they are 20% of the population. A state that say that it's not their state, even they have the right to vote, it's not their state, it's the state of the Jewish in the world. But for the Middle East, nobody can see clear what will happen in the next steps, because this unaccepted political attitude of the United States. Now, because, you know, if you are thinking clearly, the best thing for the Americans today is to build a Palestinian state beside Israel and to give Al-Aqsa to the Muslimic world. You know what is Al-Aqsa? You can imagine that Al-Aqsa will become a part of the Muslimic world tomorrow. What nice present the Americans give to the Muslims war. The kind of resistance today in the Muslimic war will can be changed a little bit, at least a little bit, if America will give Jerusalem to the Al-Quds, not Jerusalem, Jewish Jerusalem, Al-Quds to the Arab world. You understand which kind of winner they came out if they are pushing Israel to a compromise. The problem is that a lot of parts of the pro-Israeli lobby in Washington is against it. In Israeli government of Sharon is making what they can do to not to let this application of the American political. Then nobody knows now. Nobody really knows. Don't forget that the Gulf War was the preparation in some way to the Oslo peace. Something very deep in the Israeli consciousness, from 48 till the last 2 years, was the unwillingness to accept a fixed border. The Zionist dream of colonization didn't want to accept borders because, like every nationalism, want always to become bigger and bigger. It's not only specific to Zionist nationalism. You see, United States was built also with conquering Texas, conquering New Mexico, you know. In some time, Japanese wanted also to build a very great national empire. But from 45, most of the states in the world accepted borders as fixed borders. From 1950, nobody can change a border with 1 meter. From the middle of the last century. The Israeli politicians didn't understand that changing border was good from the 19th century, but not for the second half of the 20th century. This is only the big conflict. I believe that a big part of the Palestinian leaders today accept the 67 borders. I believe. Not all of them. I know that Hamas doesn't accept. The Jihad Islamic is not ready to accept. But in most of the Palestinians, it's difficult for them to accept this, I understand. But I think in a peace process of 67 borders, it can bring something. Now, these borders are not holy, but for the Israeli consciousness, the model that the Zionism in the 19th century was modeled after the German, Polish, Ukrainian nationality, that the basic is the origin of the citizens and not his culture. You understand me? The Jewish nationalism came out from areas in Europe that the conception of nation was an ethnic conception, not a political conception, not a cultural conception. The reasons is because the Ukrainian, the Polish, the German, the Lithuanian push out the Jewish because of their nationalism that was ethnic nationalism. For a nationalistic Polish, a Jew wasn't a part of his nation. Zionism accepts the principle of ethnic nationalism, and it brought it here. They didn't try to make the Arabs that were living in Israel a part of their nation at all. They pushed them out all the time. They transformed, it's very important to understand, Jewish Arabs, Jewish Polish, to Israeli Jew. They didn't transform the Palestinian Arabs to Israeli Arabs. They didn't want them because this kind of ethnic conception of nation. I can understand after the Shoah why Israel was defined as a Jewish state. We can understand it historically after the Shoah, after the Holocaust. As a historian, I can understand it very well. Israel in 1948 was a refuge for people that came out from everywhere. They pushed away from everywhere. They become cruel and strong because they were pushed out as a weak minority in Europe. But today, 2003, all these excuses finished. We cannot continue to live with this kind of nationalism because there is not existence in the Middle East of this kind of nationalism that has to become racist. Why it has to become racist? Because if somebody is working with me in the Tel Aviv University that is born in Nazareth, this state doesn't define itself as his state, tomorrow his children can make Kosovo and Galilee. Israel has to decide to transform this patriotic vision of them to a vision of the interest of the Israeli citizenship. Make from Israeli citizenship a kind of identity that is not a place of Jewish identity. It's not in place of Arab identity. It's something more of it. You understand me? To build something higher for a Jewish or Palestinian identity, the Israeli state. To build on these two identities, or three, because there is 5% that are not Jew, Christian that came from Russia and everywhere. To build with this kind of identity, another identity, an Israeli identity, that will englobe, will invite others to this identity without how we say, cleaning their proper identity. People in the world has a few identities. You understand? They belong to a lot of groups. Politically, I think, they have to belong to the Israeli. Religiously, culturally, they can have a lot of identities. Politically, they have to have the Israeli identity. It's mean to change the programs of education. It's mean to put more holidays that will accept other holidays. To put more memorial days, to give you an example. I don't propose that Israel will change all the symbols of the Jewishness. You know, in Great Britain, till now, we can find two crosses. In Switzerland, there is a cross on the flag. You know it. It doesn't mean that a Jew in Swiss is feeling bad because of it. I don't want to destroy all the Jewish symbols of this state. It's stupid. People will be afraid for nothing. I want to put more symbols in this state. To give you an example, in the Independence Day, there is, before the Independence Day in Israel, there is a memorial day from all the soldiers of the army that died in all the wars. After it, there is an Independence Day. I can propose to Israel to put between of them a few hours to the memory of the NAKBA, to all the victims of all the wars that was between Palestinian and Israeli. I think that it will be give something, another feelings to the Palestinians that are living here. If they know that all the Israelis will stand up for the NAKBA, Israel will not lose nothing for it. In my university, I don't want to destroy this university because it was a village before. No, we cannot go back. But I think that to put something in the entrance of the university, that it will be written that it was a village, a Palestinian village, that was friendly to the Zionists in 1948 and was destroyed. Without this, will not be a peace, a real peace between Palestinians and Israelis. It's a problem of generation in Israel. Old people that were living in 1948, they denied the fact that Israel pushed away the Palestinian population. It's very interesting from biological point of view. All the old people try to deny it, they object. No, we were okay, the war of 1948 was only a war of independence. The Palestinians ran away from their own will. We tried to stop them. But what is interesting that the younger, left or right, say yes, it's happened. This is a fact. This is a part of history. I was astonishing to hear from young people, students, accept the fact that Israel pushed away in 1948 and didn't condemn it morality. They said it is a part of history. They accept it. It's easier to today to accept the fact that the refugee problem started not only from the fact that people were afraid and ran away from a war. I repeat that the young people more or less can accept the fact that Israel was very active in throwing away a part of the refugees. And it's not only because people, Palestinians, were afraid of the massacre and ran away. This phenomenon changed a lot of the Israeli consciousness. It's more easy today to analyze the war of 48 also with the concept of not massacre, not killing, but forcing Palestinians to move. Not the official position accepted today, but I say that there is a different sensibility with the youngest. Maybe they are less moral, but anyway, you can speak before people and say that today, especially because of the work of Benny Morris, you see, that become a kind of reference, a legitimate reference to explain and to know the number of the Palestinians that were pushed or ran away in 48. I mean, the fact that it's between 650,000 and 700,000 of Palestinians in 48 were obliged. But you see, I want to say, for me as a historian, it is less important. For me, it is less important if people were running away because bombs fall near their houses or because they heard rumors of killings and they ran away, in people that were forced physically to move away. For me, it's not the big issue of this war. It is much more important, in my point of view, that Israeli refused to give them coming back to their houses after the war. You see, if somebody is run away in a war, he has the same right to come back after the war to his house. Then the real issue, in my point of view as a historian, is the fact that 700,000 people were moved during the war, in the power that was built in Israeli state refused all the years to give them coming back. As a historian, I have to say also that if we are speaking about deeply, knowing that it's a human tragedy, there is a fact that disturbs me a lot when I'm speaking about this, because I know quite well that if this 700,000 could come back, or even they would not move away or throw away in 48, if they stay in the Israeli state, I don't believe that the Israeli state could continue to be an Israeli state after 1950. We know it. Now, if you are looking at the conference in Taba, if you remember, 2.5 years ago, in the conference in Taba, we know that the Palestinians started to speak about numbers. Their first offer in the conference, you know, Taba, after Camp David, the first proposition was 400,000. Now, if somebody started to speak about numbers, it means that he denied from others the right of return. You understand me? If Saib Arikat spoke about 400, but not publicly, it was, I know from the Israeli side, that the Palestinians started to speak concretely about 400,000. In that time, Barak, the Prime Minister of Israel, accepted more or less 40,000. Today, again, I don't know if there is a Palestinians that will accept to make peace without the right of return. Yesterday happened a little bit. I participated in debate in the TV yesterday, and it was one near me was one of the leaders of the settlers, very famous one. I even said my friend, and I put my arms on him because he said never a civil war. We will put the arms and we'll go out from the colonies. He said it. Then I put my arms and say, my friend, I hope that you are not living in illusions. I hope nobody will keep this picture in the archives to show me. But he said, never, never, I will not take arms against you. It's you that want to make a civil war with me. And I said, no, I don't want to make a civil war with you at all. But civil war, like Professor Leibovich says once, sometimes the people has to make a civil war for some values, like the Americans, for example, with the slavery. Maybe the reason that Japan made this militaristic war in the 30s and the 40s, because in Japan didn't happen in the past a civil war to change the Japanese society. Sometimes to avoid, not to come to a national war or a world war, it's better a civil war, you understand? In Germany, nobody has the courage to make a civil war. This is the reason that we got a Second World War. You understand me? I'm against civil war. I hope that it will not be a civil war. But the question is, a permanent war with all the Arab world till the end, or a civil war? You understand me? Sometimes people have to decide what they want.
What Leibovich said?
He said that he believed that to finish with the settlers, Israel will confront it with a civil war, he believed. He said it for a few years. I said it yesterday on the TV that I am not for a civil war, but it's true that Labour will say that to go out from this situation, Israel will have to pass a civil war, like the French to make the revolution, like the Americans to make their revolution against the slavery. In Israel, we have to make a civil war to decide what is the borders of Israel, because a state without borders is a dangerous state in the world in the beginning of this 21st century. A state that doesn't recognize their borders is a dangerous state, especially if they have a nuclear arm. Sometimes, if you don't want to make a civil war, you make a worse war, you see, like with the Germans and the Japanese. Japan didn't pass their modernization a kind of democratic civil war. It's true, no? This is the reason that they translated the civil war to a world war. To finish with a kind of part of society, of aristocratic society, militaristic aristocratic society, was finished in a world war and not in a civil war, with a lot of more deaths in the world war. This is the tragedy of Japan also. They have two myths. The myth of nation and state, and myth of territory. If settlers will kill soldiers, the two myths will become in opposition. You understand me? Yeah? And then it's finished. One myth will be opposite to another. Territory or nation state. You understand? The army represents the nation state. The army for 57 years, 5 years or 57 years, the army represents the renovation of the Israeli Jewish people after 2,000 years. To shoot soldiers in uniform, it will be too much to this myth, central myth in the Israeli consciousness. The best thing that Israel make is the army, no? not literature, not music, not painting, not philosophy. Do you know a lot of Israeli philosophers? No. But you know that we have one of the best army in the world, no? This myth, army, reflects the nation state, the renaissance of the Jewish in the 20th century, to shoot soldiers from territorial point of view, from land against state. You understand the difference? Land against state. The cult of the state is strong enough. The cult of the land, you understand me? Most of the Israelis have the cult. The cult of the state is stronger in Israel from the land, you understand? Not with the settlers, but they will become in this contradiction with the first shoot.
יכול לדבר אנגלית?
Yeah, if you want. I'm writing a book now that I try to explain the Jewish in history are not, how we say it, a race, a people race, a nation. After the destruction of the temple in 70, it wasn't exile of the people that live in Judah here. It wasn't an exile. A lot of people were killed in the revolt, you know. But, you know, the story that with the destruction of the temple, it was the exile of the Jew, it's a legend, it was a myth, that started with the Christians, the first Christian. They started to say, you see this Jew, because of the fact that they didn't accept Jesus Christ, God punished them and sent them away. Judaism was the first monotheism to spread, and I tried to bring a lot of proof. Most of the Jewish in the world, in the ancient world, was people that adopted Judaism. You see, it's not like the Phoenician. The Phoenician, the Greek, when they went away, when they make colonization, they keep their language. Besides this, they were people that lived on the sea, with the sea, walked on the sea, traveled in the sea. The people of Judah turned their back to the sea. They were not a people of commerce, of money, and not of travelers. You understand me? This is a little anti-Semitic legend about the Jewish that moved. No, the Jewish was a people that walk on the earth. You see, and they didn't move.